Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming here. And some more will join later, but let's get started. So today I'm going to present what I've called as the Non-Official India Development Goals 2047. It's non-official, meaning that it has nothing to do with any government or even with any think tank. This is just personally what I have prepared. And I've prepared these basically for young people so that they who are going to be around in 2047 have something by which they can keep track of what's happening to their country for the next 23, 24 years instead of the next 4 to 5 years, which is where most of the political parties are focused. So the objective is to provide broad guidance for India's development to 2047. Implementation, I will discuss subsequently. First, we need to have the goals that we can agree to. And to get to implementation, my next key step is to develop sub goals, 3 digits. I have 3 goals that are single digit, and I have 10 goals that are 2 digit, and I hope to soon get 25 goals, sub goals that are 3 digit, and then we can talk about implementation. So the first goal, NIDG 1, is the main economic goal. Make all Indians reasonably financially well off. Now, reasonably is, of course, a subjective term, and it needs a lot of discussion and analysis, and I hope we get that, because it's not something that can be defined from theory, and it's not something that is actually defined in the literature, because most of the focus is on who's poor and who's not. But we need to get beyond that, because poverty, even if people are not poor, if they are near poor, they are still not reasonably financially well off, and they could easily slip back into poverty, as happened during COVID. So we need a clearer and better definition of what is reasonably financially well off. We don't have it yet, but I hope we can get it. Within it, we have sub-goals. So the first one is to create millions of reasonably paying jobs for young people of all skill levels. And this all skill levels is critical because the Indian education system basically stinks, and people living in villages, etc., cannot hope to get good skills, but they will need jobs when they are 18, 16, something like that. They will need jobs. They are not going to be engineers and doctors and people like that. They're just going to be high school dropouts or maybe high school completed, but not a high degree. So this is a critical job, the so-called demographic dividend, lots of people coming in, 10 million people, millions of people coming looking for work, and they are of low skills, quite a few of them. They all need jobs. So without it, they're not going anywhere except perhaps to slums in large cities. Second one is to attain sustained high real GDP growth rates. Currently, India is hitting 6.5%. That's good, but my current slogan is good is not good enough. We need to be excellent. And excellent means we have to have the same kind of growth rates that China had when it was growing fast, which was an average of more than 9%. We haven't hit 9% ever, and that's where we need to be if we want to be reasonably financially well off. But just the GDP growth rate is not enough. You need to keep economic inequalities in check. And very important for India, promote equality of opportunity for all. This is not a concept that is widely discussed in India, equality of opportunity, but it's a very important concept because it means you need to avoid discrimination based on traditional identities. Traditional identities like tribe, religion, caste, region, and all that. That's what's holding various aspects of Indian society back. There needs to be equality of opportunity for all. And this is, I think, one of my key new statements here. Everybody knows what is the Gini coefficient of income and wealth and so on. But how do we define equality of opportunity? And how do we get equality of opportunity? Of course, how do we get it is not so hard. We need to provide good education, have good health to all, irrespective of anything that we can think of. And then provide effective, efficient subsidies as needed. The economic model that we have in India doesn't reach, the benefits don't reach everybody. We have to have subsidies. And I fear that India is now in subsidy raj, where subsidies are unchecked and are too much in number, and there's no clear discussion. Actually, the development literature and the textbooks don't really discuss subsidies at all. And that's a big weakness because we really don't have guidance on how to do effective and efficient subsidies. Mostly the thing is we have too many subsidies, or we have this or we have that. But we really need to start thinking about whom we are going to subsidize and how, and keep it in check. And finally, keep local and global pollution in check. And note that I put local first because India's polluted rivers, polluted cities are terrible. I have a lung situation and my doctor has told me you can't go to Delhi. Okay, it's not right for you. Okay, so this is NIDG 1. NIDG 2 is a little bit unformed because it's not something that's common in the development literature. A focus on quality of life. In fact, it's perhaps even more important than GDP or anything else to focus on the quality of life. And here my focus is on not the social factors that determine the quality of life, but how you can get what I've called as efficient, effective, responsive, and accountable governance at all levels. And in India, we have at least 3 and maybe 4 levels. We have the central government, we have the state governments, we have the Panchayati Raj, which is a constitutional body. And then in practical terms, we have the district authorities, which really run the district, and the municipalities, which really run the cities. And all of them need to be EERA, effective, efficient, responsive, and accountable to improve the quality of life. More formally, we need quality public goods. And by public goods, I'm defining it here as in economics, non-rivalrous goods and services. This is a core function of the government, and they need to do this. And we need to have world-class public agencies, including utilities, private or public, such as water supply, electricity, internet, and so on. So without this, the quality of life cannot improve. And finally, NIDG 3, become a leading worldwide economic power. And that has 3 aspects. 3.1, become economically competitive with China, which is India's real competitor, and become a regional leader. So that's not an internationally worldwide looking goal. It's really looking within Asia as to what our role should be. And number 2, use international markets to our benefit while keeping domestic consequences in mind. This is sort of the lessons we have learned from globalization, that over-reliance on international markets, whether it is for goods or services or funds, can be a bit disruptive at times to the local economy. And finally, 3.3, make the rupee an international currency. That's like a statement that we have arrived. It's not really an economic goal as such. It's more a social and political goal that we are strong enough, our economy is good enough, our macroeconomics are good enough that it can become an international currency. Okay. I will briefly go through some of the details, but not too many. It's because you can see these yourself. So under create millions of reasonably paying jobs, the point I'm making is that FDI is not enough. And now everybody is saying this, that Indian domestic investment is too low. And we aren't going to get anywhere with the current level of domestic investment. Large-scale factories are one option. They do create good paying jobs, but not enough of them. Okay, so we need to, and the key conclusion which I put in bold there is that we need to develop tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Most of the focus in India is on villages or on large cities. And in large cities, we are talking about metro, smart cities, slum development, and in villages, we are there. But really, what's missing is the focus on tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So that's one of the key recommendations. There's not much new in this, except we can see China and India GDP growth rates. The average China real GDP growth rate from 1990 till present is 8.9%, and India is 5.97. So if you are 3 percentage points behind, on average, behind China, you are not going to make it. So high GDP growth rates are essential. People always criticize GDP. Oh, economists are obsessed with GDP. Doesn't mean much on the ground. Truth is that you do need the high GDP. It's not by itself enough, but without it, you aren't going to get there. And keeping inequalities in check, I've noted here that currently India is in what I call a subsidy Raj. Subsidy Raj constrains future growth because when you provide current subsidies in large numbers, the government budgets are constrained and you don't have the focus and money for good health and education, which is the future growth. So subsidy Raj constrains future growth, and something must be done about subsidy Raj. And ultimately, lack of economic opportunity hold back economic progress. The women's labor force participation rate is low in India. It's too low. And you are not going to get to be an advanced country if a huge proportion of your people aren't in the workforce. But there is no real way to measure equality of opportunity, and we need to work on it. I've already talked about subsidies, so I won't go through those. Local pollution in check, this is going to be very, very tough in India because the local pollution comes because we produce goods and consumer services. Keep producing consumer goods and services, you're going to have pollution. And few governments are able to check heavy polluting production, consumption, and transportation. So streets are littered and congested, water and air are polluted. Delhi used to be the worst. I believe now Lahore has taken that crown. It hardly matters because this problem is the same everywhere. We're going to have terrible pollution. And no government, no political authority can really do this. We have been trying to clean the Ganges for 20 years, 30 years, however many years. It's not clean, and it's going to be very tough. So improve the quality of life. So let's look at some of the details. Basically, I already told you we need good governance in union state governments, municipal authorities, and district and village panchayat bodies. Again, you have subsidy Raj everywhere. The recent elections in Karnataka, which the Congress won, were fought on 5 guarantees. Even in other states, the state governments are producing so many guarantees and subsidies. Then you have problems, and there is inefficiency and corruption in government. So it's a real difficulty. It's not going to happen easily. And for example, if you look at Wi-Fi in India, is seriously lagging in Wi-Fi. I try to talk to people in villages. You hardly have people who tell me their village doesn't even have Wi-Fi. Even in the small towns, it's tough. So this is all very straightforward after that. But becoming competitive with China is a very, very difficult task. We really have to have immense focus on economy and development of technology. It isn't there. So look at what has happened. The China to India GDP per capita ratio has increased steadily from around 1 in 1990 to around 5 in 2022. Okay, so it's that little dotted line. The ratio of China's GDP per capita to India's GDP per capita has gone from ratio of around 1, equality in 1990, to 5 in 2022. So even though India has had, I chose 1990 because India has had liberalization since that time, but it has worked much more for China at that time than for India. It hasn't worked. And India remains a major importer from China of critical inputs into the economy. People think that China just sells cheap junk, but what India is buying from China is industrial inputs. And what is India exporting there is old-fashioned raw materials. So let's end it here as to why all this, because these things are very clear now. So the 3 goals, in my opinion, are broadly enough to guide India's economy to 2047. The goals are interrelated and have to be taken together as a package. And my next steps are really how to implement them, which means first, I will develop an implementation plan at digit level 1, then an implementation plan at digit level 2, and then implementation at digit level 3, which is sub goals. Okay, so let me stop the share now. And I think some of the senior people who said they would join have not joined. So I think it's Farrukh Iqbal, the discussant. Farrukh, let's have you. Farrukh.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Subodh. Thank you for going through your presentation in a very clear manner. I have a few comments. I'll just start with them. But before that, I want to note that the most exciting aspect of discussing India's goals, official or unofficial, you've called them unofficial, is that they actually seem realistic and feasible. Not just desirable. One can always have aspirations and goals of that nature. But we are now talking about the largest country in the world, which has serious prospects of reaching 7+ points of growth percentage, right? So the growth rate can be 7% or higher. You've said historically it has not been so, but it can be so. It does not seem like pie in the sky. That's very encouraging, and I'll go into some aspects related to that. But I want to note that in comparison, my country, Pakistan, is afflicted by a sense of hopelessness because the prevailing political economic framework there just is not supportive of long-run development. It's completely short-run in nature, and it is completely a fight among political groups who just want to accumulate personal and group wealth and power. So I'll just keep that as a background because it's very important. No matter what other issues divide India across many functions, there really does seem to be support for growth, long-run growth, and most political actors broadly act in a fashion that is supportive. So now let me just kind of take up a few things that you've mentioned. And here I'm going to be selective, not everything, but just selective. The first point I want to talk about is why focus on inequality if focusing on poverty alone, poverty and vulnerability, which is the concept you had mentioned, would be sufficient. For example, We all know that there are reasonably well-defined poverty levels. And if you then take the given international poverty level or whatever chosen and add 2 more deciles, that could well be your target population. And then you wouldn't have to talk about inequality per se, because everything you want to do, for every policy action that needs to be taken for the bottom 30%, let's say 40%, whatever you get to with my definition, poverty plus 2 deciles, is achieved. And broadly speaking, inequality is also affected by that. My experience in inequality discussions is it just tends to divide people too much. Whereas focusing on poverty or some concept of absolute income or relative income, which is just takes the chill off the discussion. People can say, yes, we think really that the bottom 40% really need help of some sort. So it's just a way of framing the discussion. You and I both have been in the development world for 40 years, starting from graduate school. My lesson is that focusing on inequality has never really been that productive, whereas focusing on poverty, however defined, and you can define it generously, achieves the same ends and involves the same policy actions. So that's my comment on that. The subsidy Raj issue, I think, is an important one. But here, there is some good news. And this will, of course, come into view when you start talking about, at a later stage, the implementation steps. So I accept that there is more that you have in mind, but it comes later. But I wanted to just bring that up. The emerging ideas that have emerged in development economics for over the last, let's say, 30 years, leads one to some, what should one say, confidence that issues relating to subsidies can be dealt with and are being dealt with in many countries in a much better way than they used to. And here I have the following ideas in mind. First, we have learned a lot about the impact of smart subsidies versus universal subsidies. In other words, we have seen that certain subsidies which are applied across the board to the entire population, and in many countries that used to be electricity pricing, gasoline pricing, sometimes even food pricing, tend to waste a lot on undeserving populations. And it's fairly easy to switch from one to the other, including with the use of smart cards and other sort of technological ways to distinguish between deserving and undeserving population. So I'm actually quite confident that the subsidy Raj can, over time, be modified. There will be a political backlash, of course, because modifying it means taking it away from some upper middle income groups to mostly lower income groups, but it has to be done. A second point I would simply note, again, from a positive perspective, is that by now a lot has been done on the issue of cash transfers versus price subsidies. And it appears that cash transfers are winning the academic debate. Many studies now show cash transfers being very smart in terms of reaching, or effective in terms of reaching populations, and being having the lowest administrative costs of transfer. When you do a subsidy, there are leakages and admin costs, and cash transfers have very little of those. And finally, there's a lot of discussion now and information about conditional versus unconditional transfers. So there's also, so these factors make me think that the subsidy Raj, which you say must be dealt with, can be dealt with. And that's a good thing to do, right? I'll make one final comment. Perhaps we can come back to some of these issues at a later point. The final comment is about how much investment does one need? Right now, India is going at, I think you mentioned 25 to 30%. Many folks might think that's fairly good. I mean, again, speaking from the perspective of Pakistan, Pakistan has rarely had investment rates, investment to GDP, of above 15% in the last 30 years. In fact, it's usually been, 12% to 13%. Now, Pakistan is not a good case to compare with, but it gives you a sense of what India has already achieved. India has achieved rates of investment of 25 to 30%. True, China has done much more, but one could also argue that China's investment has also been inefficient, and some of the inefficiencies are beginning to reveal themselves in terms of huge construction projects, housing in particular, that have not gone well, and so on and so forth. I mean, I don't have all the details, but my sense is going from 30% of GDP to 40% of GDP in investment, it will certainly generate more growth, but it may be inefficient growth, and it may be something that saddles future generations with more domestic and foreign debt than may be desirable. But remains to be seen. This is an implementation detail. So that's my last comment for the moment. I'm happy to engage in further discussion as we go along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Farrukh. I'm not going to respond. Let everybody get in first before me. Anjali is there, Anjali Kumar. Anjali, can you come up, please? You have something to say? Unless she has vanished. Anjali, you are there. Do you want to give any comments?
I'm here. I'm very pleased to be here, and your presentation's been very interesting. I'm afraid I'm not well right now, but and I feel a little hampered by the fact that I don't have your slides in front of me. And I'm not going to make many comments. I think Farrukh's comments were very, very insightful, and they add a lot to the debate. Just a couple of things from some of my own personal experience. One is that I'm not quite sure about the comparisons with China, and in a sense, why the comparisons need to set themselves as a kind of a guidepost for us. And if we have to compare with China, I think that what really set China off in its rapid growth phase was decentralized growth, but that decentralized growth was not so much through small cities, although there were small cities, as by local governments. And what happened was that the local government officials were able to compete with one another, and they were able to support productive enterprises. So it was the personal impetus of the people which was given free rein, rather than the infrastructure of the city, which led to this tremendous growth, because it created a lot of competition between officials. And I think that element of competition could be very important too. And that's why I want to emphasize the governments instead of the cities per se, though I don't dispute that the cities would follow afterwards and would be a part of it. The other comment is simply a little bit of a fine-tuning on what Farrukh had to say about the conditional cash transfers versus subsidies. I feel that what Farrukh earlier talked about in the way of smart subsidies is essentially the same thing as a conditional cash transfer or a cash transfer, because it's also a targeted subsidy. Now, whether that's given in the form of cash or a smart card should not really be that important. If you have an economy where most people have access to a bank account, and the money is transferred to a card, then that would be the same as cash. So I think the important point in those comments is the fact that you want to be smart about it. And that's the same thing as conditional in the case of cash, that you do want to make sure that whatever subsidies you are giving are going to be targeted towards the right people. And I do also agree that making these conditional and monitorable so that you can see what results from them would also be a step in the right direction. So I'm just going to stop right now, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to fade out early. But I would like very much to have a copy of your entire presentation later on, if you could send it by email or some such method.
Okay, thank you, Anjali. By the way, for those who are not familiar, she's a very senior retired World Bank staff officer, lives near me, been a friend for many years, and knows Farrukh also, of course. So thank you, Anjali. I know you're not well. Thank you for taking the time and coming here to give these comments. Thank you so much. Mr. Sachdev, you are a senior person. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Subodh. I've been following you since I read your book on India's path to prosperity from 2022 to 2047, and even earlier on Facebook. And I have been associated as with health sector reforms program with the European Commission and subsequently with the DFID. Presently, I work as a mentor for some civil society organizations in trying to engage the community participation in governance. That is the theme that I'm associated with. I've been particularly looking up your book, and in your presentation, you have made a mention of real GDP. And it is this real, under quotes, that is an important part which I like to address, because in terms of sustainable development goals, India is doing very poorly. And we don't seem to be reaching the international targets in 2025, as well to 2025, as well as 2030 goals. Because when it comes to nutritional goals or health related goals, we are way behind. So when in your book you have talked briefly on this, that the GDP has to be real, because what is happening is that the people are not able to buy things. Even food they are not able to have. So in terms of latest NFHS 5 results, only 11% children have minimum acceptable diet. And that is something which is a very worrisome sign. So whether it is women's health issue, more than 50% women continue to be anemic. So those are the areas where I believe that the community needs to engage, and younger people can and should work on that area so that more human resource development can take place in India. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sachdev. It's really good to have you here to give your perspective. And as I've said, I will not answer anyone till everybody's had a chance to speak. Yeah. So let me go to the next person. Sayak, you have a question, please ask. Okay, it's not answering. Yeah, go ahead. Chance to speak. Yeah, good.
So can I ask?
Yeah. You are logged in from
you
two
said that
places.
the MSME.
We can't hear you, Shaik, so why don't you wait your turn and let somebody, because you are also logged in from two places and we can't see what's going on. So let somebody else come to this. Himansu, please.
Yeah. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So the discussion that was led by Iqbal sir, I just have a little disagreement with him when he was talking about the inequality vs the poverty. because I think for India, for a country like India, which is highly diverse, in terms of religion, caste, ethnicity, and all these things. So I think we should first look into the inequality, then we should go to the poverty part, because poverty is backed by this inequalities things. So even if we if we first solve this poverty part, which is mostly economic poverty. So when we talk about the economic poverty, then we can solve it easily by providing some kind of economic policies and some economic help to the people. But then we'll have the diversities issues. So we can say that whether this economic thing will reach to the all of the diversities or not. I mean, for example, if we are providing a fixed amount of money to all the people who are below poverty line, then will all the people will have equal access to those money, because the diversities is very high among themselves, because they belong to various caste groups. So for upper caste people, even if they're poor, their access could be higher compared to the lower caste people. So that kind of issues is always there in India. So I think we need to look into this inequality part also. And with inequality, we can come up with this poverty part. So that is one thing. And secondly, I would like to talk about this job for young people. So there are so many vacancies in India at this moment also. But because of this political issues, the youth, they are not getting their desired job. For example, nowadays we can see in the social media that some people who are highly qualified, they are very skillful, but they are not getting the job according to their qualification. So in a sense, education is just it is not meeting the needs of the person, needs of the the educators. So there is a need to develop this job sector so that we can go out from this jobless growth, because we know that as we are talking about these development goals, so we must need the development of the people instead of only the economic growth. So that is what I want to speak here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alan Samuel, please.
I'd just like to give a brief introduction before going ahead. So my name is Alan, and I'm a recent economics student. I graduated from the Symbiosis School of Economics, and since June, I've been working with a market research company. So just I'd like to give a few contributions towards the discussion. As you had mentioned, Subodh sir, that the comparison towards China, it is true. It is our obvious competitor. It is the one that we must target towards and aspire to be. I'd just like to give a few more details to provide how big that gap actually is. And also, I'd go into a bit more details about exports that India does versus what China does. So when we look, I'd just like to start with telling about one particular, a particular code, that is HS code 85, that is electrical machinery and electronics. So this is actually the most traded in the entire globe, if you look at per HS codes, and it accounted for about 15% of total trade in 2021. China accounts for around 974 billion of total trade within this sector, while India is just contributing about around some 20 billion towards it. So when we look at this particular section, that is manufacturing, that is the electrical machinery and electronics sector, India is exports are minuscule compared to China, and that's something we need to really improve. It's also important that while we aspire towards this, that we should not put agriculture aside, because it's obvious that agriculture is our largest employer and there are most of the people in the country dependent on it. And also one more thing that I'd like to bring up is about what is discussed before. So what are India's actually most exported products? That is refined petroleum, diamonds, and actually in 2021, diamonds was India's largest exported good as well. And also jewelry, rice, a lot of primary goods essentially, while China's is very clearly, it's mostly broadcasting equipment, computers, office machinery, etc. And these are the sort of things that we need to keep in mind when we look towards 2047. And we also need to keep in mind that by then we lose the demographic dividend that we have right now. So these are the sort of things that we should keep in mind. And also, besides the developed world, we should also not ignore the global south, that is the African countries, sub-Saharan countries, which are going to show to be countries that are emerging economies as well. So for example, I'd just like to point out a few countries. So that is actually Nigeria, for example, it's projected to reach around 380 million population and be the third most populated by 2050. So this is a huge market. So we have to also keep these things in mind. And other countries such as Kenya, for example, are also witnessing extremely high GDP growth rates. So these countries must also be catered towards, because they are countries that even recently we can see with the G20, with India particularly helping Africa to become part of the council. It's something that we have potential to grow as well. And as discussed before, so this has been recurring between discussants about poverty versus inequality. And I'd like to give my own contribution towards this. So actually, I believe that, yeah, it's important that we should focus on alleviating poverty as well as keep inequality in check. But actually, I'd like to agree with Dr. Farrukh that actually, I'd give an example. So when we look back in 1991, actually, that is, we can see that both Odisha as well as Bihar were among the lowest in terms of GDP. But currently, if you look, Bihar is still the lowest, while Odisha has witnessed tremendous growth. And we can see that maybe to some degree, my analysis will be that it focused more on alleviating poverty, while in Bihar, to some degree, you can say it's still greatly running on caste politics. So in terms of this, if you particularly focus on on addressing inequality, what will result in, it will result in a lot of groups like splitting up and several parties trying to cater towards these. So in the end, it does not really alleviate poverty, and it becomes like trying to ensure vote bank politics for the electoral cycle, and it doesn't essentially translate towards long-term growth in achieving certain goals. So this is just one short contribution. And yeah, that's about it for now. I'd be glad to contribute more with the discussion ahead.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear from Anup. He's a startup entrepreneur, Anup Kumar Dey. So he's a startup entrepreneur. He's very interested in a form of agriculture which goes beyond organic. Let's listen from Anup as to what his comments are. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Let's listen to Anup. Anup, please, are you there?
Yeah, sir, I am here, but I'm right now having my dinner listening to you. So can I?
Okay, all right.
Can
We'll come back to you. Let's listen to Khushi.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
the only young woman here, so let's listen to her.
So, sir, by everything that I heard, so I really like about Farrukh sir's insight on why we should focus on poverty instead of inequality due to the backslash that inequality usually face. And also coming on to the youth part that someone I can't remember the name. I am really sorry about that. The issue with youth unemployment. So India is considered as one of the most the working age population in India at this point of time is highest, but unfortunately, India is facing this issue of not actually utilizing its human power, human resource power, which is a very issue. And coming on to youth unemployment, so I come from a background where I come from economics background, and I had a lot of my classmates who got placed at some of the big threes, but unfortunately they never got the chance to start their career because their placement, their offer is getting delayed day by day. So actually there is issue with the number of employment which is actually present in the market. So that is all I wanted to add, and that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Khushi. We have a young person whom I don't know, Tanay. Let's listen to Tanay. Let's see what he has to say.
Hi, I just joined, but I just have one question because So like inequality and poverty are like they're like inextricably linked really closely. So by addressing so won't by addressing inequality to a certain degree address a lot of poverty as well, and by addressing poverty address the inequality as well, because they're quite interlinked if they're looked at, right?
Okay, so that's a key question. I think almost everybody's had a chance to speak, so let me now respond. Tanay, if you can shut off, it doesn't show me as the speaker, it's still showing you. So somehow you have to get off so that I become the speaker. Okay, even if not, all right, it doesn't matter. Let me respond to Farrukh, and first of all, thank you, Farrukh. Those were very useful comments. On the issue that everybody is talking about, inequality and poverty, actually, I will have both. When under the creation of jobs, you're really talking about poverty. So maybe I should rewrite that as the poverty, and then the jobs is the means to remove the poverty. Okay, so perhaps that, but I don't want to let go of the equality of opportunity. Because what I hear from young people who go to various places and so on, and they come back and say, sir, it's very, very social. Everything is about caste, religion, language, this and that. It's a very important part of Indian reality. And it has an impact on the economy. So we can't treat this just as a homogeneous society in which opportunity depends only upon certain economic factors. There are social factors which are key, and I do want to bring those out in my sub goals to say, listen, unless in the economy, you can address those social factors the way you want in your home, but you certainly need not to have them addressed. And, a contentious example of this is, and I'm not taking sides here, is in the California case where California is basically almost passed an amendment to a law that caste cannot be a factor in hiring in California. The governor vetoed it, but you can see that Indian society has that as a key factor. And though it's supposed, so I do want to bring up that regional, what I call as traditional identities in the, and of course, under equality of opportunity, I will focus on health and education as the key factors that determine the equality of opportunity. Without health and education at a young age, there's no chance of equality of opportunity. On the subsidies, yes, we do teach all these things, conditional cash transfers in our courses, and we know under Arvind Subramaniam, the Indian government did adopt a policy called JAM, J for Jandhan, which is bank accounts, A for Aadhaar, which is your identity, and M for money, so that you transfer the subsidy money more efficiently, bypass the local people. The problem is that is only the union government. The state governments are equally important in India, and the state governments are on a reckless spree of spending money. Reckless meaning they haven't fine-tuned it. I don't mean to say subsidies are bad, but they haven't fine-tuned it. Okay, they haven't thought it through. There are ad hoc experiments. Look at the 5 Karnataka subsidies. They're politically attractive, but are they also economically effective and efficient? So subsidies are going to be there in India, and the development literature is not caught up with the detailed reality of India, where the actual subsidies are being determined at the state level. And the states are responsible for health and education in India, not the union government. All the programs of primary health and primary education are run by the state governments. And if they don't have the funds to improve those because they are providing subsidies, then we have a real problem. So it's actually at the state level, not at the union government level, because the union government actually doesn't do much in terms of health and education, though they can fund it, but the actual practice is with the state. So those really, comparison with China, of course, China is a completely different country, but that's your real competitor in the region. You aren't going to do it the way they did it in China. You're going to do it your own way. What is that way? That is what to be covered in the implementation. Now, obviously, I'll also add that I'm not so arrogant that I think I can write all of this by myself. I don't have that knowledge and that depth, but I hope to start the discussion as we have had here. And as I create a draft of it and our comments, etc., I hope it creates a discussion and people begin to focus on this, and especially young people. So that is basically my response to everything that has been said. Sayak, you have a question, so please ask.
Sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, I am Sayak Chakraborty. Can I ask?
Okay, if you don't have a question, we can ask Anup. He's asked me, can I speak now? So Anup, please go ahead.
Yeah, hello, sir. Good evening. So basically, due to the connectivity issue in the mid, I was disconnected. But what I feel about the agenda, what you have set. I am working as a researcher, senior researcher in a natural farming project. So on that perspective, through that lens, I can say that in like next 25 years, as India is in the celebration mode of Vikshit Bharat 2047, what I understand and what I feel that India needs to change its agriculture policy, and a robust haul is needed in the agriculture sector. And like I also would like to urge on the issue of agroecological changes or the natural farming, how the government of India should approach other states or all the stakeholders, though agriculture is a state subject. So we need to engage all the stakeholders, and the government should make a policy, like though government is on the path of promoting natural farming through Niti Aayog, but what I feel that it's not being like done or implementing, they are not implementing on a ground level. So that I feel that earlier all the fellow participants was talking about the inequalities, poverty, but as we know that 60 to 70% is still like they are in the agriculture sector on that job, and those people who are not in the agriculture sector, they are becoming the laborer. So the problem, if we can increase the farmers labor, or we can provide them a nutritious food, and that the natural farming has an aspect of food security also, so that can minimize the problem of also the food security, food inflation, and the health and nutrition perspective of the food we consume on a daily basis, and also the agriculture, like in generation of the income, and what we have talked about, the Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self sufficient or self mode, the self-sufficient mode. Through that, I think we can leverage the agriculture sector. What I understand, what I feel, as I'm working on the field level in Andhra Pradesh in India. So that one thing I would like to share with you.
Okay, Anup, thank you so much. And I'd like to respond to that. Actually, the thing is that people I talk to tend to talk in sectors, the health sector, education sector, agriculture sector. And I've deliberately not talked about it because I've stayed at a very high level. What I want is to go into the 3-digit, then we can see if I do this in the agriculture sector, then which 2-digit goal does it lead to? And which 1-digit goal it leads to. If I do this thing in the health sector, then which 2-digit goal it leads to and which 1-digit goal it leads to. So instead of focusing right away at the practical sectoral level, I am trying to set it up in such a way that what we do at the practical sectoral level can then be traced back to the higher level 2-digit goal and the 1-digit goal. Where is it all going? And it may happen, as I said, it's an interrelated package. that you look at one intervention, say it's in the education sector, it contributes to 2 or 3 different sub goals, or 2 or 1 or 2 of the 1-digit goal. So this is how I'm thinking about it, not at the sectoral level yet, but of course at the 3-digit level, sub goal level, we'll have to go to the sectors, and apart from the macroeconomics, which is a completely non-sectoral, but that's where it will come to more reality. And as we go down, perhaps even to 4-digit level, where you are actually saying, look, this is relevant for this part of India, and that is relevant for that part of India. So I'm just trying to conceptually set it up in such a way that we don't look at the small picture only. We look at the small picture, but we see it as a part of a piece of the big jigsaw puzzle. Right? The big jigsaw puzzle is what I have set up, and I'm trying to now focus on getting the interventions that everybody is talking about. Fortunately, nobody is talking about population, thank God, and that is out. But when people talk about various sectors, I want to say that yes, we will have to go at it sector by sector, and the macroeconomics, which is fiscal policy, monetary policy, and in fiscal policy is the subsidy Raj, which is not, and then which sectors to subsidize. So I'm just trying to clarify my own thinking on how the different interventions work and how we can assess the different interventions. And one final point I forgot to mention to Farrukh, yes, 25%, 30% of investment GDP ratio is not bad at all. But as you know, my starting slogan is good is not good enough. We need to be hitting 4s and 6s, not scoring single runs. We need to be hitting 4s and 6s all the time. If India is going to catch up to China, it's not going to happen by being good enough. Okay, maybe 30, maybe 40% is excessive GDP ratio to investment, and it could be. And it is well known now that China has government-driven investment in China is not very efficient and effective. Host cities everywhere. So there are problems there. But we need to not, certainly the case that 30%, 25 to 30% is not going to do it. Even the New York Times had it 2 days back, that the investment in India is too low for India's ambitions. For India's growth rate at 6.5%, it's enough, but it's not enough for India's ambitions. And I think the young people are very ambitious. They want growth at the high level. So let me stop there. Sayak, you have a question, so please ask.
Sir, can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yeah, please.
I have just one question. Sir, you know that in India, the MSME provide a crucial role. But due to COVID-19, they are adversely affected. And so the Standing Committee of Parliament published a report that and many literatures indicate that Indian banking sectors have conservative attitude towards this MSME sector, and the government does not provide much support to this MSME sector. Prime Minister Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced various policies, but many evidence and World Bank International Financial Corporation agency of World Bank report the MSME, the revival of MSME is not well. The condition of MSME is not well. So what do you think about this? Because MSME contribute a major play a important role in Indian growth story. So I want to know what your opinion regarding this.
Okay, so I do mention MSMEs specifically in my slide presentation, which I have now sent to everyone. And actually, I have a initiative coming up in India called Lift Up India 2047. It's an NGO that is being set up, and it is heavily focused in supporting MSMEs to do better. Okay, so, but just to add a little bit here, MSME means medium, small, and micro enterprises. They're formally defined. Only 1 or 2% of the MSMEs are medium. They are all in big cities and they are actually quite modern and well-to-do. And though they are perhaps 2% of the total, they contribute 70 to 80% of what goes under MSMEs. The majority, 90%, are micro. That means mom and pop shops, one person, not even two people, one person or two persons, and they are not doing well at all. And they are not able to take advantage of the various government schemes that are in place. And part of the effort that Lift Up India will do is to help these micro enterprises grow and take advantage of the various government schemes. Our team has visited a small town in West Bengal called Shuri. It's the capital of Birbhum, is the headquarters of Birbhum district. And we have established links with the government agency responsible for MSMEs in each district, the District Industry Center. And we will help set up more MSMEs, mainly small and micro, mainly micro, and we will help the existing ones to grow. That's where the main source of creating jobs in those towns will be. So I'm very much aware of what is happening to these, and certainly trying my best to get something going on the ground with respect to them, because that's so my focus is the small towns, 1 lakh population, and one of the key elements is to support the existing, and there are no medium MSMEs in those towns. They are only small and micro, and mainly micro. So we are looking to have a very practical approach to help them with technology, how to get credit from the government. I've contacted SIDBI and so on. So we are working on it. Okay, it'll take perhaps 6-7 months more to see some results on the ground, but we are working in small towns, and if we succeed, then it will be replicated in other towns. And they are featured in the details of my slides. Okay. All right, I think, Sayak, that's the good question that you asked. Anybody else has any comment? Otherwise, I'll ask Farrukh to sum it up.
Yes, sir. So I'd just like to add one more comment.
Yeah.
It's a separate comment. It's not really linked towards what is being discussed, not that much at least. So with regards to employment, I'd like to say like standard education is no longer like the sole requirement, and like skill building and vocalization is far more important. And to a degree that is being implemented as well under the current government. But there's also an importance towards understanding other things as well as the importance of networking. So like, I believe that this is really the key. And even we can see, especially after like the pandemic, there has also been a shift towards online learning. It has given like access towards world-class education material. Sometimes it's subsidized or even free of cost. So I don't really think this will help in a job creation, but it is a means by which candidates can help stand out from others. That's all.
Yeah, Alan, there's a lot of discussion about people who are educated, helping them get jobs, and I'm involved in that too. But the real focus for me is the people with low levels of education. They go into village, their parents are on subsidy, the Narega subsidy, they have hardly enough money to eat or to get a good education. And when they become 16, 17, 18, what are they going to do? There's no job for them in the village. Their parents don't own any land. What are they going to do? There are millions of them. And if they don't become prosperous, India cannot be prosperous. So that's simple as that. We can focus all our attention on startups, and I'm involved with several young people who are in startups, and we can focus on educated people and networking and so on. And that's what's happening through my Vidpeds and so on. But here we are looking at the large numbers of people who maximum will go to poor colleges. Maximum that they will ever go to. Like Narayan Murthy said, 80% of India's engineering graduates are unemployable. And at least they are engineering graduates, they made it there. If you read Pratham, you read the Acer reports, 5th standard students cannot write at the 2nd standard level. They cannot do arithmetic at 2nd standard level. They're in 5th grade. what are these people going to do? Where are the jobs for them?
Yes.
And developing the skills is part of the answer. But anyway, let me shut up. I talk too much anyway, and let Farrukh sum it up, and we end it here. Then I will write more and I will distribute, and we will have maybe I'll finish in July 2024, all that I can say. And then at that point, it will be up to the others. So that's my target. So let me hear from Farrukh.
Great. Thank you, Subodh. Thank you, everyone, for a very interesting discussion. It's still at the level of aggregate objectives. And so, of course, that leaves a lot of room for interpretation and sometimes even for not fully understanding what the true issues are. But when you get down to the 2-digit and 3-digit issues that you mentioned, I think things will become very, very clear. I want to just restate some things just as a way of kind of indicating what I've taken away from here. One is, again, that I think that getting 6 to 7% growth is very good. Getting more will be even better. So as you said, not good enough. You want something better. That's perfectly all right. For an aspirational document, that's very good. What's more important is, as I said, the politico-economic environment in India, despite all the noise, despite all the divisions, seems to be supportive of such aspirational goals. That's a very big thing, I think. And in many countries, that does not exist. And I gave you an example. I think that's just, it's helpful to put things in that framework. On the issue of subsidies, I think the points that have been made about India's special characteristics with respect to caste and perhaps ethnic and religious groups are well taken. So at some point, with more detail on exactly how they may offset a policy that is simply saying, anyone with a per capita income of less than X will get a cash grant, right? I assume that the problem in India is that, yes, you can make that, but at the point of implementation, the cash grant will be made available to some groups, but not to others. And I accept that, although I think, and just to kind of give you a historical example from the US, agricultural subsidies in the US have been significant in the last 50, 70 years. And as we well know, they have been directed mostly away from certain groups of people, meaning Black farmers have not benefited from the same subsidies to the same extent. And this is acknowledged now by not only academic researchers, but people in government and so on. So I can see how that works. The one issue that I'd like to highlight, which has come up here, and you've also mentioned it, that India seems to have made a lot of progress on bank accounts and ID cards. And if cash transfers are made largely on the basis of these two data points, that hey, this is your bank account, this is your ID card, and we have determined through some other source of information that you are in the bottom 50%, you get that cash transfer. You do not have to meet a local level or federal level public official who decides whether or not you get the subsidy. It's sort of automatically assigned. That may prove to be a way out of this dilemma in the implementation. So I think that would be very good if that works. And finally, just one point. It's not a summary of anything, but I just thought of it in the discussion of education and what should we focus on. And I think you hit it right on the head when you said your real interest on education is at the lower end, where the quality is very poor, and that system just needs to be improved. And I want to support that by giving you the following example. The objective of public education policy should be to add the most value, right? It turns out from some very difficult and limited studies that value added in education, by which I mean the difference between the value at exit of a student from a certain level, let's just say high school or 4 years of college, compared to the value at entry, which has to be forecasted from existing socioeconomic data. This difference, the value added, is highest in primary and secondary schooling and in polytechnic colleges. This study in England indicated that Oxford and Cambridge and other places that are well known for their quality of education do not feature in the top 10, 20 institutions when they are ranked in terms of value added. It is very important to focus on value at entry. When very poor people with very poor education get even a mild boost through a good public education program, they add the most value. So I want to just simply add to your observation that that's where the focus should be.
Okay,
That's all.
Farrukh, I
Thank
will
you.
agree with you on that last point since we haven't discussed it before. I've been saying it to too many people that the colleges I attended in India had negligible value added.
Yeah, so IITs and
They had
IIMs
negligible value added.
Yeah.
They take in great students and then turn out great students. But what's the value added compared to what would have happened to them anyhow is negligible.
Yes.
Okay, we have set up these institutions, but we don't really add value because we take great students, we take world-class students, we turn out world-class output. But at least in my time, there was the issue of value added was forget it. There's no need.
Very good.
You are good. Okay, but this is actually now it is also well known to me that the greatest value added is 0 to 3 years. Okay.
There you go.
And it
Preschool.
is written in the National Education Policy of India 2020 that we must do something at 0 to 3, and they have put in place, there are 2 paragraphs on 0 to 3, because 0 to 3, it turns out, you know, in the US, Sesame Street, the TV program was started in the 1970s, aimed at first grade. If you see Sesame Street today, it is aimed at 0 to 3.
Yes.
Because everybody knows that it's really 0 to 3, and then the first 3 years
are critical.
And we have no way of improving it in India right now. We have no way. It stinks.
And in terms of policy, this means a focus on nutrition.
Yes, it means that, you know, you need...
And mother's education, of course.
Yeah, the kids need to have enough food before they can learn anything. And we are, you know, when we come to education, that is where my thinking is, that we need to have very good education up to 5th grade. After that, with the smartphones and the internet, the kids can learn something on their own, but you cannot expect a 4-year-old to learn from the internet yet. That the internet's not... So yes, Farrukh, thank you for pointing it out. That is, you know, I'm trying not to get into the specifics, but on education, it's really 0 to 8 years. That is the critical. And as I see my friends have their grandchildren and my own grandchild and so on, I can see how they sink, everything sinks into their brain, what you tell them when they are 1, 2 years old. They can learn anything if they're there. And, you know, since they are grandchildren of well-off people, they are getting personal attention all the time, and it'll be very hard to beat them for anyone because they got so much from 0. By the way, the National Education Policy of India has 2 paragraphs on 0 to 3. Okay, so it's not something that the union, but they don't have the means. And they've given the means there, but when you read the means they've given, and I don't have the means, I'm looking to find the means so that I can get to 0 to 3, because it means getting into the mother's home. I don't have the means through any NGO yet, but that's where my focus ultimately will be, nutrition and time with the kids when they are 0 to 3, because that's the first necessary step. If they are neglected, And by the way, the Washington, D.C. government has a 0 to 3 policy, Farrukh. Every state in the US is moving to 0 to 3
Towards there,
because everybody now realizes that parents are too busy working, parents are like this, there's no family, the village to bring up the child is gone. So where is the child getting the daily, minute by minute? If they go to daycare, by the way, the daycare provides, this is the solution in India that is being thought of, Anganwadi. Okay, the Anganwadi workers are there, the women are there, but they are really dealing with older children. Now, how to get to 0 to 3? Or let us put it 0 to 8. 0 to 7.
Primary school.
Yeah, this is really the key to it. And I'm glad that you made me talk about it. I don't talk about it much, but I do say it. And in fact, that has to be the focus. If you want long-run growth, you need to have that education. At that level, you need not to teach them anything, but you need to get them to learn whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, sorry, I'm very passionate about it. All right, thank you.
Good.
Okay, we will do that. And, all these things like networking and all, yeah, fine, we are all doing it, but we are capable of doing it. Those poor children, 0 to 5 years old, they really need to have something. And whether it's conditional cash transfer to the women, and yes, India does have the world's most efficient electronic ID, the Aadhaar card, created by a co-founder of Infosys, Nilan Kalni, under direct orders from the Prime Minister outside the bureaucracy. It works. They have bank accounts, but the banks are too far. They have not yet set up real dealers for the banks in the villages.
Yes, easy paisa time.
Who would then operate the account. But yes, the cash transfers do take place, and it is a very promising thing. But that's the union government. And I'm much more, in India now, the focus is that unless the state governments catch up, the union government is only one player in the game. So it's not the player, it's only one player. Since 1991, one of the actual implications of the 1991 liberalization was that the chief ministers became economically powerful. That led to the rise of Narendra Modi in Gujarat, where he could lead the state, and the downfall of states like West Bengal, where they didn't do it as well. And so India is now running on chief ministers, not so much on the prime minister, not alone. So somebody here mentioned Odisha, and Odisha was, as said, in Bihar, and Odisha were equally poor. Today, Odisha is far ahead of Bihar. It's still a very poor state, but it's one of my target states because there's potential there. So the chief ministers actually run the show, and since we're talking about Odisha, the chief minister of Odisha rarely even goes to Delhi. Doesn't go. He doesn't have his independent party of his own, and he just runs his state. Forget it, guys. I don't need anything. I'll run my state and I'll make it grow. Still poor, but the growth rate has been from a very poor state, they moved to a poor state. Okay, so anyway, thank you all, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be, and thank you, Farrukh, very much. This is the last time I'll have a discussion. The next time we have a discussion, it'll be with 3-digit goals.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you all. Let's end it here and keep in touch. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.